But in Luke chapter number 22, Jesus and his disciples are in the Garden of Gethsemane. And they are there to pray, right? They're there praying. Some of them are sleeping, but they're supposed to be praying. And so they're in the garden, and all of a sudden, Judas and these soldiers, they show up to take Jesus to the cross. And in John chapter 18, we actually see an account given of this story. And we see that they showed up and they said, we're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. And when they said that, Jesus goes, I am he. And they all just like fall to the ground. It's amazing. Like they came to take him and to capture him. But when they came, just his name alone caused them to fall to the ground, which lets you know that Jesus did not get taken to the cross. He willingly went. Nobody could force Jesus to get up on the cross. Nobody could make him go, but because he loved you enough, he was willing to do it. And so they show up to take him to the cross, to escort him there. And when they get there, they fall to the ground. And Peter, Simon Peter, who is probably one of my favorite disciples because I feel like I can relate to him the most, because Simon Peter loved Jesus, but he didn't always get it right. He loved Jesus, but even in front of Jesus, he'd mess up sometimes. So Simon Peter, just thinks that this is his moment to just kind of act a little bit extra. So he takes his sword while these guys are down on the ground, and he takes his sword and he's like, ah! And he cuts this guy's ear off. His name's Malchus. And he cuts the guy's ear off, and that's kind of where we want to look today. It's such an amazing, appetizing thing, reading about a guy getting his ear cut off. But it's okay. In Luke chapter number 22, verse 49, it says, when Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, Lord, should we strike with our swords? I mean, at least they asked, right? Like, at least they had the common courtesy to be like, hey, should we strike? But the group asked, but Peter just kind of did his own thing. How many know there's always one, right? There's always the one in the group that just kind of just goes crazy. So they asked as a group, but Peter, it says in verse 50, one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. But Jesus answered, no more of this. And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Jesus and his disciples are in the Garden of Gethsemane. And they're in this garden and they're praying. When Judas and his soldiers show up to take Jesus to be crucified. And Jesus knew that's why they were there. The disciples had been told that's why they were there. They were in denial a little bit, but they had been told. And then the people who came with Judas, the soldiers, they knew that's why they were there. But Peter had eaten his Wheaties that morning, and he wanted to put him to the test. So when he has this moment, he takes this sword and he cuts this guy's ear off in front of Jesus. And I can picture Peter in this moment. I can picture it. He's proud of himself. He's excited. He's like, yeah, you're not taking Jesus without a fight, right? I got your back, Jesus. I'm going to protect you, Jesus. All my sword training classes, they paid off. Jesus, you said it was a waste of time because you could heal all things and do all things. But look what happened, Jesus. And Jesus, he bends down to the ground and he picks up this ear. And he's essentially just like, Peter, thanks, but no thanks. Like, thank you, but no thank you. He gets down, he picks up this ear, and he puts it back on to Malchus's head. Peter reacted, but Jesus responded in love and in forgiveness. Peter reacts in hatred and in anger, but Jesus reaches down, picks up the ear, puts it back on because he responded in love and forgiveness. And what happens so often is we feel like we love. We tell people that we love until a moment happens. You ever had a moment in your life where the love that you shared for someone or that you had for someone suddenly went out the window because of a moment? Because of what they said to you in a moment, what they did to you in a moment? Parents, how your child looked at you in a moment. Sometimes it's just a look. I'm like, we got a 2-year-old kid that gives me a look that I don't like. Like, you're not even a teenager yet. What is this look? But it's like you're fine with your love walk until you get into a moment. But when you hit that moment, you got to take a moment. When you hit a moment where you want to lose all that love and all that frustration and everything, you got to take a moment. So this morning, that's what I want to talk to you this morning on the subject of take a moment. Take a moment. Let's pray together. God, we thank you for today. We just thank you that we have the opportunity to gather here this morning. I pray, Lord, that you would help each and every one of us to have ears to hear from you today. Lord, I pray that you would help them not to hear or see me, but to hear and see you. Pray that you would help us to apply to our lives what is spoken. We thank you for it in Jesus' name. And everybody said, Amen. Now, have you ever experienced something like this? Have you ever had a time in your life where you had a situation that was fun, but it was also frustrating? Right? Like it was fun, but it also kind of frustrated you a little bit. Anybody ever had like a fun and frustrating experience? I'll give you an example. Like my wife and I, that is us just about every day since our son Judah started talking. Right? Like it's fun, but it's also frustrating. Because when he was a baby, we wanted him to talk. We were begging him to talk because we were like, what do you want? Right? It was like the Notebook. What do you want? I don't know. What do you want? I don't know. Like, he just kind of looked at you. But he would cry. So I'm like, well, that's not what he wants. And so it was like, I just want him to get to the point where he can tell me what he likes, what he doesn't like, what he wants to do, what he doesn't want to do. Joke's on us. Because he got there. And for the last year and a couple of months, he has been talking nonstop. And it's been fun because he's funny, right? And he has this great personality and he says all this stuff. It's fun because of that reason. And we can carry on actual full-length conversations. But then at the same time, it's frustrating because right now, his favorite word is no. Everything is no. He just wants to say no. In fact, a few weeks ago, we were upstairs playing with his toys, and he told me, he said, Daddy, please put my cars into a line. So I put his cars into a line. And he runs back over, and he's like, no, not like that, Daddy, no. And I'm like, well, you should have specified. You know, I mean, like, you should have specified. You said put him in a line, I put him in a line. So then he goes, you should have specified. I'm like, because, see, he's also repeating everything we say right now. With that said, if you ever hear him say something bad, wasn't me, it was his mom. But he's repeating everything right now. I could just see somebody, right? Like, you will never believe what the pastor's son said in EP Kids this Sunday. Like, what are they teaching him? I will go ahead and give you a heads up. I don't know if I should do this. We're in church. I'm just going to be honest and give you a heads up so that you know. He has trouble pronouncing his TRs. Okay? They come out as it sounds like an F, which is a big problem because right now his favorite toys are trucks. So it's fun being out in public and having our 2-year-old son run up to people holding a truck, thankfully, but not yelling truck. You tracking what I'm saying? So it's been interesting, right? We're learning as we go. It's been a process. But last week, I was up playing with him and his toys upstairs, and Nicole, she calls up, and she's like, dinner's ready. Now, here's the thing that you need to know. I've been trying to teach him, like, don't tell me no, right? Like, I love you, but don't tell me no. I mean, if I ask you to do something nicely, right? And we want him to do things on his own because we feel like if he does it on his own, then it'll last longer than if we're making him do something. So it's like we'll ask him, hey, do you want to do this? Before just telling him, okay, we got to do this. Hey, Judah, you want to put your PJs on? No. Okay, let's go put our PJs on, right? That's kind of how it works. So we're upstairs, we're playing with his toys, and Nicole calls up, says dinner's ready. So I said, Judah, you want to go eat dinner? No. Judah, you want to go watch Baby Bum? No. Judah, let's go eat dinner. No. Baby said no. Because they train you, right? They teach you. And I'm like, what happened? So then she calls up there. She says, Judah, do you want to eat hot dogs and watch Mater Hiccups? Yes! Yes, Daddy, downstairs. Come on, Daddy, let's go downstairs. And I'm mad. I'm annoyed, right? Because I'm like, this is mom magic. What is this? So I get down there, and I'm like, how come he told me no, but he told you yes to essentially the same thing? And she said, you got to ask the right question. You got to ask the right question. See, I asked him a question, but apparently it wasn't the right question. When she got the verbalization down of exactly what he wanted, it was the right question. And what happened in this story is we see the disciples ask the right question. They asked the right question. They said, should we strike? And the first thing I need you to see today is when it comes to our walk with Jesus, we got to ask the right question. We got to ask the right question. They said in verse number 49, when Jesus' followers saw what was going to happen, they said, Lord, should we strike with our swords? Lord, should we strike with our swords? And I point that out this morning because it's easy for us to get into the habit of telling Jesus what we're going to do. It's easy for us to go ahead and make up our minds what we're going to do. It's even easy for us to pray and ask Jesus for guidance, but already know in our mind exactly what we're going to do. Regardless of what he says, we know what we're going to do. But the disciples, they asked, should we strike? They wanted to strike, but they said, should we strike? They had in their heart to do it, but they asked before they did it. And it's so important that we take the time to actually ask the right question. Jesus, should I do this? And I do not blame them, by the way, for the question that they asked. They did not say, should we forgive them? Should we let them go? They said, should we strike? I don't blame them for that because they're surrounded by other soldiers who have swords. Who is going to stand there looking at soldiers with swords and be like, I love you. Hey, no. So I don't blame them for being like, should we strike? Like, are we going to attack them first? They going to attack us first? What's going to happen? Which is why it is so important that we seek Jesus' guidance. It's so important. Before we act, ask. Before you act, ask. Before you act, not after. Because what happens a lot of times is we act and then we ask, right? We act, and because we reacted, we get ourselves into a mess, and we hurt our marriages and our relationships and our businesses, our jobs, our relationships with our children. But then once we act and get into a mess, then we ask, Jesus, I need help. Jesus, can you undo what I did? Jesus, can you fix this? So we act and then we ask, but Jesus says, no, you need to ask before you act. And what a difference our lives would look like if before we acted, we took time to ask. How differently our lives would be if before we acted out, before we did the thing that we want to do, we stopped to take a moment to ask, hey, should I do this? Should we strike? Should I respond? Should I react to this? Should I handle this? Or should I just continue to let it go? But what happens is we act and then ask. We do what we wanted to do anyways, and we hurt people, and then it's like, Jesus, I need you to fix it. Jesus, I need you to help me here. Jesus, I need you to undo this. And because he's good and because he loves us, he will. But then we do it again. And it becomes a cycle, and we end up in the exact same situation that we were in the first time. Because whenever we handle things on our own, whenever we look to ourselves for the answer, we get it wrong every single time. Every single time. And hear me, I say this in love, but just because you think that it's a good idea does not mean it's a good idea. My wife's brother and myself and her cousin, when we were in Florida a couple years ago, we looked out, saw a sandbar out in the middle of the ocean. We thought it was a good idea to swim out to the sandbar and to stand on top of the sandbar. You know what happened when we got out to the sandbar? It wasn't as shallow as it looked like it was. So now we're in the middle of the ocean. We've swam out there, and we can't reach. So we're tired, and now we have to swim all the way back. And legitimately, I thought somebody was dying that day. Like, for real, like, might have been her brother. Okay? Wasn't going to be me. I will stand on your shoulders, my dude, on this sandbar. But we thought it was this great idea to get out there, and then we got out there and realized it was a mess, because that's what happens so often is we think that we have such a good idea till we actually get out to it. Once we get out to it, we realize, oh no, I'm in a mess. Jesus help me. Jesus save me from this. Jesus fix this. And Jesus is like, I'm going to do it for you. But if you would have asked before you went, I could have told you how that was going to turn out and saved you a lot of trouble. You ask before you act. We think that we have the right answer, but we don't always have the right answer. We've got to ask the right question. Ask the right question. No matter what it looks like, no matter how you feel, ask the right question without making up in your mind ahead of time what you're already going to do. Because some of us, we pray to Jesus for things, and we pray and ask his opinion, but we don't really want to hear his opinion. We want to hear our opinion come out of his mouth. We don't really want to hear what he has to say. We want to hear what we have to say come out of his mouth. We want to hear what we've already made up in our minds that we're going to do come out of his mouth. And this is exactly what Peter did. Peter's like, should we strike? Right? Like in the middle of asking the question, Jesus is acting out, or Peter is acting out what he was asking Jesus about. Should we, strike? Like, I hope so, because I did it. Did it, Jesus. You didn't answer fast enough. I did it. I struck. So we're like Jesus, should I strike? No. Well, you got a mess to clean up now. That's what Peter did. He's like in the middle of asking. He had already made up his mind what he was going to do before they ever even asked, and so he carried it out anyways. And whenever we do this, it always leads to the wrong reaction. Always leads to the wrong reaction every single time. When we may ask the right question, but we act before we ask, it turns out to be the wrong reaction every single time. Verse 50 is said, and one of them struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his right ear. Cutting off his right ear. Whenever we react, it's always wrong. Whenever we have a reaction to something, it is always wrong because it's based off of what happened to us instead of being based off of what's best for us. Whenever we react, we're reacting to what they did instead of saying, God, what is best? You ever had a time in your life where you reacted harshly or quickly? You just kind of reacted in the moment without even thinking, and you said something that you later regretted saying, but you couldn't go back and undo it because it's already been said? You ever had a time where somebody was saying something to you, and you got angry at them for what they were saying, and so you popped off at them, and then once they actually finished saying what they were saying, you realized they weren't saying what you thought they were saying? And now you felt silly for popping off at them, for not even saying what you thought they had said? Because we reacted. Because we looked at a moment, and instead of taking the time to say, God, what would you have me say? What would you have me do? How would you have me handle this situation? We just reacted. Happens all the time. Driving on the road, I know it seems simple and it's silly, and do we have to talk about it in church? But I need to hear it in church because we can drive on the road and somebody cuts us off and immediately we say something that we probably shouldn't have said. And you know what I've started thinking to myself? Maybe they're headed to the hospital. Maybe they got a baby in the car. Maybe she's about to give birth. I'd be cutting people off too. I don't know. But instead of reacting, taking a moment to take a moment. You'd be amazed how much tension and stress and anger would leave your body if you would take a moment. Just take a moment. Instead of just something happening and then you do it, something happens, you just, okay, now I'm ready. Take a moment. Don't react. Or sometimes what I do, and I'm just being fully honest, is I don't even ask the Lord for guidance on something. I just do it because I already know what his answer is going to be. Anybody else going to relate to that? I'm not even going to pray about it because I already know that he's going to tell me don't do it. I already know he's going to tell me not to slash his tires. I know it. So I'm not even praying about it. It's the whole ask for forgiveness, not permission approach. Right? Like I know he's going to tell me it's wrong to punch that person in the face. I know he's going to tell me it's wrong to lie to them. I know he's going to tell me it's wrong to do these things. So I'm just not even going to pray and ask. I'm just going to do it. Then once I do it and it turns out badly for me, then I'll pray and ask him to help me out of this situation. That's what happens when we react. We do things that we never should have done. We knew that we shouldn't have done. We get ourselves into a mess, and then we go praying and asking God to help get us out of the mess that we've gotten ourselves in. But if we're going to love always, we cannot live a lifestyle of reaction. If we're going to love always, we cannot live a lifestyle of reaction, because whenever we react, we always get it wrong. Every single time. Every single time we react, we get it wrong. Like, when was the last time that you actually took a moment to seek God on a decision before making it in a moment? Like, when was the last time that you actually stopped, somebody did something, you had lined up right away what you needed to say back, but you stopped and you took a moment to pray and ask God, like, God, is this what's best for me? Is this what you have for me? God, is this what you desire for me, or is this what I desire for myself? If we would do this, it would save a lot of heartache and a lot of pain. If we would just take a moment to seek God and see, is this something that I am supposed to do? Is this something I am supposed to say? It would save a lot of marriages, a lot of businesses, a lot of churches, if we would take time to say, is this what I need to do? God, is this how I need to respond? Is this what I need to say to this person? Because I tell them that I love them, and if I say this, they're not going to feel like I love them. God, should I do this? When was the last time that we actually took the moment, in a moment, to seek him before having to respond? You know it's okay to look at somebody and say, I need a moment. We had dinner with some friends on Friday night, and one of my favorite things that I've ever seen a kid do. Whenever the son would get in trouble, he'd get in trouble a couple times, probably because Judah was, playing with him, maybe a bad influence, I don't know, hopefully a good influence. But the son, he'd get in trouble, and the parents would be like, do we need to talk to you? Come on, let's go talk to you. And so they'd go and they'd talk to him. When they got back out with him, he literally would just run back to his bedroom. We were like, what's going on? And they said, oh, he just needs a moment. Because he literally he knows at like 3 or 4 years old, he knows he needs to go take a moment. A kid knows that he needs to go to his room and take a moment before saying something to his parents. Yet we as adults are running around just saying whatever we want to say. I'm looking, I'm like, man, this is amazing. What would happen in our marriages if instead of, I'm not saying run away, but take a moment? What would happen if in the middle of an argument, you just, instead of bringing up what happened 10 years ago that you've been saving in the bank, for such a time as this, Lord, this is the moment. What would happen if you would just say, I need a moment? I mean, what would happen? What would happen? Who can get mad at you for taking a moment? Matter of fact, it would help some of our jobs. It would help some of us keep a job if we learned to take a moment. If we learned that just because you think your boss is something in that moment, you don't have to tell them. Just because you think that they've done, just take a moment. Just take a moment. Somebody say, take a moment. Before you react, take a moment. Take the time to be like, you know what? Is it worth it? Is this God? Is this love? Am I about to say love? I don't think so. No, doesn't sound like love. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say it. Take a moment. Just don't react, but take that moment. Because hear me, your first reaction is always the worst version of yourself. your first reaction is always the worst version of yourself. Whenever you react in that moment, it's always the worst version of yourself, because whenever we react, we always get it wrong. And here's the crazy part. It's not always reacting out of malice that is bad. Because it's not like we always react out of malice. Sometimes we react out of love. Sometimes we react out of love and it's not good. Jesus was the thing that Peter cherished the most. Cherished him the most. These guys did not even come to attack Peter. They came to take Jesus. Jesus was the thing that Peter valued the most. If you want to see your love, and if you love always come to light, then let it be tested when what you value most comes under attack. Let's see how you react when your child comes home and tells you that the teacher said something mean to them that day. We're going to take time to take a moment, give our child a good example, gather our thoughts, and then go have a peaceful conversation? Or are we going to be like, oh, no, pick up the phone right then? What would happen if we just took time? Because when we react, it's always the worst version of ourselves. It's always the worst version. But it's not always out of malice. Sometimes it's out of love. Sometimes it really is. It's out of love. Hear me, and this is not going to be popular. I'm just going to say that. It's not going to be popular, but I don't care. I feel like I need to say it anyways. But sometimes as followers of Jesus, we react in hate towards others in the name of love for Jesus. Sometimes we react towards others in a hateful way because we say we love Jesus. Just because somebody doesn't believe what you believe does not mean that they are your enemy. Just because somebody does not agree with what you say, it does not mean that they are your enemy. It means that they are someone that you need to lead to Jesus by showing them love. Somebody that you need to show love to so that you can help lead them to Jesus, because let's get this out of the way. You and I only have one enemy, and his name is not Susan, it's not Karen, it's not Tom. His name is Satan. And we cannot allow him to use us to push other people away from Jesus because they don't believe what we believe yet. Just because they don't believe what we believe in that moment. Because who's to say that they won't someday? We can't go around reacting like Peter, right? Going around just like, Jesus loves you. Yeah. How can you not believe that Jesus is Lord? Are you stupid? Like, I've heard people say this. I've heard people say it, not people I know, but I've heard people say it. Because they're reacting in all this anger and all this vitriol towards people that they're called to love. Jesus did not call us to be followers of him so that we could be self-righteous and look down on everybody else because they didn't agree with us. He called us to be followers of Jesus so that we could go and show them love and compel them to come. And you are not compelling anybody to come anywhere near that. I really do feel like Jesus sits up in heaven sometimes and is like, you are the worst PR person in the history of the world. Like, the worst PR person. Because Peter reacted. Peter, he had gumption, right? But he reacted the wrong way. But Jesus responded in love. Jesus had the proper response. Peter had the wrong reaction, but Jesus had the proper response. It says in verse number 51 that Jesus answered, "No more of this." And he touched the man's ear and healed him. Peter reacted in the flesh, but we're called to live in the Spirit. Peter reacted in a fleshly way, but Jesus showed him how to live in love. Jesus responded in love. And so much that Jesus healed this man. He healed the very one that was attacking him. Jesus healed the very one. In fact, if you study it, Malchus was the servant of the high priest, which actually means he was second in command to the high priest. And the high priest was not here in this moment. So the leader of this group was Malchus. He is the one leading the charge to take Jesus to be hung on the cross. And Jesus responds in love by healing the very one that was trying to hurt him. By healing the very one who had come to lead him to the cross. And my question to you this morning is, can you love enough to pray for healing to what broke you? Can you love enough to pray for the thing that broke your spirit, that broke your heart, that hurt you the most, to see healing? See, I think that one of the greatest examples in modern day time of someone who lived with such love, in such a way that said, you know what, I'm going to love those that hurt me in such a way that I'm going to pray for that to be healed, was Nelson Mandela. Because I've studied his life time and time and time again, just to see everything that he went through. And for 27 years, he was in prison in his own country for trying to get equality for everyone. 27 years. Can you imagine this? For 27 years. And that in and of itself is remarkable. But what's even more remarkable is that for all 27 years, he never stopped striving to see healing in the country that had put him in prison. Never stopped striving to see that. Everything he did, he was striving to see healing to the country that imprisoned him. And back many years ago when he passed away, I read one of his biographies, and it just blew my mind, all kinds of things in it. But there was one specific little passage in the biography that I wanted to share today real quick, and then we'll close out. But it said in this biography that Nelson Mandela had many teachers in his life, but the greatest of them was prison. Prison molded the man we see and know today. He learned about life and leadership from many sources, but the 27 years he spent in prison became the crucible that both hardened him and burned away all that was extraneous. Prison taught him self-control, discipline, and focus, the things that he considers essential, and it taught him how to be a full human being. How did this passionate revolutionary become a measured statesman? In prison. He had to temper his responses to everything. In other words, he had to take a moment. He had to take a moment. There was little a prisoner could control. The one thing you could control, that you had to control, was yourself. There was no room for outburst or self-indulgence or lack of discipline. He had no zone of privacy. When I first walked into Mandela's old cell, I gasped. It's not a human-sized space, much less Mandela-sized. He could not stretch out when he was lying down. It was obvious that prison had both literally and figuratively molded him. There was no room for extra motion or emotion. Everything had to be pruned away. And over, I used to ask him how prison changed him. How was the man that came out in 1990 different from the man who entered in 1962? And this question annoyed him. He either ignored it, went straight to a policy answer, but finally one day he said to me, I came out mature. I came out mature. See, maturity is not reacting in anger. Maturity is responding in love. Maturity is being able to look at the very thing that hurts you and to bring healing to it. It's to be willing to look at the very thing that hurts you the most and to bring healing, to fight for healing, to bring and strive for healing in that moment. See, Jesus responded in love. The last miracle, I'll close with this, the last miracle that Jesus ever performed before getting to the cross was to the one who was leading him there. The last miracle that Jesus performed on this route to the cross was not on his disciple. It wasn't on the one who had his back. It wasn't on the one who had always been there for him. It was on the one who was trying to hurt him. And that's the last miracle that Jesus did before going to the cross, because he said, I want everybody to know that no matter what people do to you, you're to love them. No matter how people treat you, you're to love them. No matter if people agree with you, you're to love them. No matter what they say about you, you're to love them. If they lie about you, You're to love them. Peter reacted in anger, but Jesus responded in love and in forgiveness because he took a moment. He took a moment. After Peter had his rage, Jesus took a moment to bend down, to pick up the ear, and to place it back on Malchus's head as a way of saying, listen, no matter what you do to me, it's not going to affect who I am. No matter what you do to me, it's not going to affect what I believe. And I believe that everyone is worthy of being treated with love.